All right, so I know we're running a little bit over, and I'm going to try not to talk for too long, because after me is all of you feeding back on the work that you've been doing today. So first thing I wanted to ask you all to do, if you've got Post-it notes, there's some around. If you can just grab those and a pen, that would be awesome. But it is bright up here, isn't it? All right, so I just want you, just for a moment, to have a think about this question here. So the question is, what value do you, and that's you personally, and thinking about, you're here, why you're here, what value do you get from talking to people that do the same role as you? And you can limit this down a little bit. If you just want to take, about 3 things, so 3 Post-it notes, 1 thing per Post-it note. We're going to put them up on one of these banners afterwards, cover up all the sponsors. It'll probably really annoy them. But if you just want to take a moment and write 3 things, an answer to this question. Anyone not got Post-it notes? I'm checking that you're all writing. All right, so we're going to keep those. If you want to add to them, you can. And when the talk is finished, I want you all just to put them up on that banner that's just over there to the left. So hold on to those for the moment. So hello, I'm Emily, not a developer or a tester. I generally call myself an agile and lean coach or consultant or trainer, depending on who it is that I'm talking to. And I spend a lot of time working in organizations that are going through digital transformation. So generally helping organizations work better, do what they do better, which often ends up with me working kind of around the edges of teams rather than the teams themselves, because when you're in large organizations, it's the bit around the edges that generally stops you being able to move quickly. And I have a bit of a habit, so when I put this up, I don't have a habit of collecting logos. What my habit is connecting people. And this happens in my professional life, it happens in my personal life as well. So all these things here on the right-hand side are kind of community things that I do just for the love of it. So there's some things on there, there's a couple of meetups that I set up. One Agile on the Bench is one where we meet in a park, do 10-minute talks. Hackney was a community forum that I set up in Hackney, which when I used to live there, which I don't anymore, and a couple of other things that I just set up, because actually I like connecting people. And this is fed over into my professional life, so there's a bunch of organizations over here where I've helped them connect people through communities of practice at some time. This is a bit, shameful plug. And then I wrote a book called Building Successful Communities of Practice. So that's there, that exists. It's mainly about communities of practice within organizations. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is some of the things that I've learned about how to connect people and what the value you get out of connecting with people. And hopefully that's something that you can take forward with this community, with the wider BDD community, and take into some of the conversations that you have over the next couple of days for those of you that are around over the weekend. So one thing that's really important to know is that we are wired to connect with other people. This is really important. You know, we need other people around us. One of the reasons is that the way that we are, us as humans, we're born without the ability to look after ourselves. It takes us quite a number of years to get to the stage where we reach maturity or become adults. But when we're born, we don't have the ability to look after ourselves. So what we need, if you take something like Maslow's hierarchy of needs that talks about food and shelter, actually what we need, number one thing, is for somebody else to provide that food and shelter for us. So we actually need to connect with other people. This is the way that we work. And, you know, social networks are popping up everywhere. We connect with other people within our organisations. This kind of shows this. And there's a fantastic book by Matthew Lieberman called Social, Why Our Brains Are Wired to Connect. It talks about this. And there's this fantastic line in there that kind of, when I read it, it reminded me of situations that I'd been in organisations. The absence of support is taken as a sign of mass rejection by the person that doesn't feel supported. So if you are in a situation or an organisation where you don't feel supported, you actually feel rejected. It also goes on to say that public speaking is one way to feel rejected by an entire room at the same time. Thank you. So it's useful for our organisations to create support networks for us, but we can create them for ourselves as well. And we often do in situations like this, in open source communities, in places where people want to come together and they get value from talking to each other, as you all wrote down things earlier. So one reason why this has become, I guess, so popular at the moment, particularly in agile organizations, I say that, some of that might just be because I talk about it a lot. I see it everywhere. It's like one of those heuristics, but I'm convinced it's true. So our organizations have changed a bit. We used to be in organizations where we sat with people that did the same thing as us. And you might have a bit of this still going on. So I used to be a project manager, and I sat on a table full of project managers. And there's a table over there full of designers, and in a windowless bit of the office, nicknamed the dev cave, were the developers. I'm not joking, they actually sat in the dev cave. And this was really great for learning from other project managers. So I could talk to project managers about things that concerned me, I could talk about issues that I had with clients, and we were quite a tight-knit group, and we had really good feedback. But it wasn't really so good for the teams that I was working on. I was working with other people, but I wasn't really sitting with them and talking to them. And then we mixed that up with multidisciplinary teams in agile organizations, and that becomes much better for the thing that we're working on, the product or service that we're building, but becomes much harder for people who are doing the same role to talk to each other and to learn from each other. So you start to create these silos. And then you put programs around them. And what you end up with someone over here that's doing the same thing as someone over here, but they never actually have the chance to talk to each other about it or learn from each other. And they have to learn that all from scratch themselves. And there's some problems around that. One of those is that insular teams can become echo chambers and display groupthink. You stop thinking outside the kind of bubble that you're in. We talk a lot about bubbles at the moment. Think a lot about the bubble that you're in, and you don't get outside thinking. And you start to display groupthink, where you don't want to create conflict, so you all agree with each other. And that's not good. You want some outside views. So silos, and silos are bad. And you know that you've got silos in your organizations when you start to say things like this. So if you've ever been on a team where you say, those people over there, that team over there, they're really rubbish at something. They're always giving us code that's rubbish. Or the supplier is a real nightmare. Or the client, or the business. I hear the business a lot. What I hear really a lot is procurement. Procurement slow everything down. And when you have that kind of language, actually, that's quite siloed behavior. You stop thinking about people as people, and you start thinking about them as this entity that do things wrong and cause you problems. And that's bad. And it means you can't work together very well. So communities of practice, the way that I work with them in organizations and also can work outside organizations, cut across teams, cut across programs, sometimes cut across organisations. And these bits here, these lines are really important. So at the side here, you have what you do. So when you're working on a product or service, you have the kind of day-to-day, the vision, the point of you being there. And then this bit here, and this is some of the crucial bit about, you know, talking to people that do the same thing as you, is the how you do it. It's it kind of keeps you honest sometimes. So when your program is China, or you've got a project manager or a scrum master, or whatever the setup is where you work, or product owner, and someone is saying, can you not just do this? And you're thinking, oh, it's not really the right thing to do. I don't think it's the right thing to do. Having other people around you that you can talk to about that can really either help you bounce ideas off them, or help give you the motivation to push back on things. So it becomes really about quality and standards of doing what it is you're doing well. Now, community of practice, here's some words around it as well. This was written by Etienne Wenger in the 90s. So groups of people who share a concern or passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. Some really important points about communities, and this applies to this community as well as communities of practice and organisations, is that they're non-hierarchical, and that's really, really important, that they're not kind of a hierarchical structure where some people know more than others. It's a space where everybody contributes. And they're also voluntary, so you can't kind of force people into them, which means they have to meet people's needs, and they have to benefit the people that were within it. So I'm going to run through some of the reasons why communities are good and some of the benefits that you can get out of them. Hopefully it will echo some of the things that you've written down. So learning is better when it's done together. So I've already talked a bit about support, and actually I think support is the number one kind of crucial thing about communities, is having other people around you to support you. But also learning is done better when it's done together. And there are a number of reasons for that. One of those, if you've ever read about social learning theory, so this is Albert Bandura, wrote about social learning theory in 1977, wrote the book, and talked about the fact that we actually learn how to behave by seeing how other people behave. So if you surround yourself with people that are behaving in good ways, then you will behave in good ways, and you start to mimic. And it's what we do as children, it's how we learn. We start to mimic our parents. So having other people around you helps with that kind of that guide for the way that you behave. And we also build on top of each other's experiences, and that's really important. I was once talking to this guy called Matt Wynn. Don't know if you've heard of him. And he had this moment, this has been in my slides since you said this, Matt. He had this moment where he went, do you know what, it's not fair. It's like, you know, footballers. So footballers, they have like match day once, I have no idea about football, once every month or couple of weeks or whatever it is. And the rest of the time they get to practice, and they get to practice what they're doing, they get feedback, and they get to get better at it. But he said, us developers, it's not fair, because we have to have match day every single day. He said, you wouldn't do that to a footballer. So there's a lot of opportunity within communities when you have other people around you doing similar things to you to practice what it is that you're doing. And practice it in an environment where you're not necessarily going to break anything. And get feedback from other people. And those feedback loops are really important for you getting better at what it is that you do. Does anyone here do anything like coding katas? It's a couple. And so that really kind of accelerates your learning because you get that feedback. A lot of the people that I work with have to run workshops as part of their role. So having an opportunity to run workshops in that safe environment of other people that aren't the clients or aren't the real situations really helps them get better at that. And they can do that with communities. So with a support network, people can really fly, like this real video of this dog. And I found this in communities that I've set up within organisations where we can bring people in that are really excited and have the right attitude but not necessarily the skills yet. And having a supportive network around them and having that ability to learn means that they can kind of get to grips with that job and really quickly. So community brains hold community knowledge. This is a really important thing about communities. Often communities of practice and organisations sit within knowledge management, which I don't think is necessarily the right place for them to sit. And you can think about knowledge as an iceberg. So you have explicit knowledge at the top of that iceberg, and that's the stuff that you can write down that doesn't change very often. So if any of you have things like wikis at work, does anyone have wiki at work? So it's always up to date, always got the right information in it. Yeah, impossible. So you can't write everything down. You can write down, like, how do I do an expenses claim? But every project you come to is different, so has different ways of doing things. So you have this huge amount of knowledge that sits under the water, and that's the implicit knowledge and the tacit knowledge. And that's the way that you approach things. That's the, if something happens, what do you do? Sometimes if you're in an organisation, it's how do you get that meeting room that no one knows how to book? Or how do you get money signed off? But that type of tacit knowledge sits within the culture and sits within the community. And what it means is if you have people talking to each other and sharing that knowledge, is that when people leave that community, it doesn't disappear. It stays within the brain. So collaboration is about building better things together. And you spent a bit of time today collaborating, which is great, not just kind of consuming information from people standing up here. And collaboration really is about building on top of each other's knowledge and each other's experiences. And this guy, Alex Pentland, wrote a book called Social Physics, which is fascinating. He talks about how organisations that spend more time talking to each other are more successful. So that kind of knowledge sharing that you get between people. And he says that communities develop a collective intelligence that's greater than the members' individual intelligence. And part of this is about the fact that if you're on your own, you never talk to anyone, then you have to experience everything in order to know it. But if you are a group of people, actually you can build on top of each other's experiences and you can benefit from that. And you get something that's greater from doing that. So collaboration really is about creating something that's better than the parts. And I like to describe that with this amazing Venn diagram. So here's two individuals. And they start coming together, start talking to each other. But what happens when they start collaborating is that they create some kind of magic. This is a Threadless Tshirt image that I stole. So it really is about that magic that comes from bringing people together and building on top of each other's ideas. And we also have a louder voice when we speak together. So one reason that I've often got involved in communities outside of work is that sorry, just checking my slides, is that actually you have a louder voice when you work together. So if you're, as individuals, it's quite hard to make anything happen. Once you get together, you have a much louder voice and you have much more opportunity to get things done. Now, my community website that I started in Hackney, part of that was about kind of positive action and bringing people together so that they could make change, but they could do that as a group of people rather than as a bunch of individuals. So I'm just going to talk about opportunity. So who's here tomorrow or over the weekend? A few people. Okay, cool. Who at the moment considers themselves part of the BDD community? Just a few. I'd suggest that you're all here, so that would make you all part of the community in some way. So what I'd like to do is just kind of finish off giving you some tips about some of the things that if you want to make, you want to become more part of the community or you want to help the community become stronger, these can be used if you want to set up communities elsewhere in your organisations as well. Just some tips to think about. So the first thing, it's always useful, it's always important to understand why something exists in the first place and to be able to articulate that to other people. So, what the vision is. Trying to understand what that is. If you don't know what it is, asking others or helping them explain it, and then owning that as a community as well, so feeding into that. You all have visions on clear visions on the products and services you're working on, right? Yeah, in theory. Okay, so trying to understand why is really important to helping people understand why you exist and want to join in or not want to join in, depending on what they want. I talked about communities being voluntary. That means that the communities need to meet the needs of its members or it won't exist anymore. And that means that if you're members, you should be feeding into what the needs of that community are and helping shape that kind of, that's really important. Or you won't get involved. It's important to have some community values as the community agrees to. Again, do you do this in your teams at work? Do you have principles, values? Anyone have team charters? 2 people. Do some of that. It's really good. It helps you talk about how do you want to treat each other as a group of people? How are you going to talk to each other? How are you going to, things like accepting each other's ideas and, not being a dick is usually a good one. If the BDD community has some of these, that's great. If you want to change them, if you want to add to them, it's a community for you all, so you should add to that. To help keep a community going and to help it kind of buy in and help you give something to do and make a difference, having a community backlog can be really important as well. Now, the BDD community itself, this isn't just about committing code, actually. It could be about helping other people. It could be about doing something that will help around the edges that isn't necessarily committing code. It might be something else. There's lots of things that you can do in order to make the community better and what you do and the outputs of that community better. So over the next couple of days, if things come out that you say, hold on, we really need to fix this thing, and there's some of you that want to do that, then you should do that. You should grab that and do that and really kind of add to making things better for the community and own it and then share it back. Okay. And then just one final tip. Who here has retrospectives within their teams? Good. Are they effective? I won't get into effective retrospectives talk, which is a completely different talk. With the community as well, it's always good to say, is this working? Is this not working? If it isn't working, what can we do to change it to make it work? So it needs to meet people's needs. If it's not meeting people's needs, what is it that needs to change? So it's something that you can do. And then finally, here's a picture of a cat. I think I was going to say something here, but actually I thought it was just a great picture, so I thought I'd leave it in. So really, this is a bit of a call to action, to get involved. You're here for a reason. You're here because you want to learn from other people. You've all met other people today, and you'll be, you've worked on stuff together, and you'll be presenting up here together. Carry that on. Do something with that. Do something with that over the open space days. If you're not involved in the open space, where's Matt gone? How else can people get involved?
I got involved in people by just going on the mailing list and answering questions that other people had that I could answer. That's how I first got started. And then I got pulled in and look at me now. You could go to
Meet up groups. Matt's going.
Sorry?
You can browse issue reports in GitHub to see what contributions are needed.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So like a lot like issue tidying in GitHub is really useful if you're a user of one of the open source tools. You can just come in and like maybe someone's filed a bug report and you don't think it makes a lot of sense. You can ask them some clarifying questions. Just something like that would really help us. Or maybe even what you could do is you could try and turn their bug report into a failing test, right? And make a pull request. Because I tell you what, as a maintainer, there's nothing like having a failing test to help ease my and like minimize the amount of time it takes me to fix that fault. Really, really good. And that can be really good practice. And we can give you feedback if we meet on failing tests.
Yeah. And if you do want to get involved in something, you don't have to do it alone as well. You don't have to sit at home and try and fix issues. Actually, it's a chance, well, things like this are chances to come together. And face-to-face communication is far superior than talking to people digitally. So coming together around things that you want to do and using things like the Slack group and the email group to do that is a fantastic thing to do to get involved. And that's it. Thank you. If people have them.
Does anyone have a burning question for Emily? There is one in the back from Bjorn.
Everyone's really eager to
it's
get
on,
their
yes, it's
projects
on.
up.
Hi. Well, I have a question. Of course, I have an opinion, so it's kind of a question disguised as a statement disguised as a question. But I would really start with like your opinion. You said in the implicit in the knowledge of Iceberg of knowledge, we can't write anything down. But the more specific question is all knowledge possible to make explicit, or is it some knowledge that is essentially tacit?
I think probably, if you think about your wiki, some is probably too fast moving to write down, I would say. So some of it will change way too quickly to ever be written down. Yeah. And some of it it's too difficult to turn that into words when it's just action-based. But you have an opinion, you said.
Yes, I said. Yes, I do. So it's like, because I work in a company, we, like 20 years ago, started a collaboration with the Royal Institute of Technology, based on the model that it is, except for explicit knowledge, there are essentially tacit knowledge, both in terms of skill and in terms of being acquainted to. And the second base of that is like it actually, the most important knowledge we have as professionals is tacit knowledge. And that could be controversial. Let's say, first of all, not all knowledge can be made explicit. And second of all, the most important thing we know as professionals is probably tacit knowledge.
Yep. I kind of either equate it sometimes to like reading about riding a bike to actually riding a bike.
That's often an example of knowledge or skill.